14 months before landing on the moon, Neil Armstrong was practicing landing the moon lander on Earth, the one that was supposed to go to the moon. However, this experiment failed terribly because Neil Armstrong was unable to successfully land the prototype. Fortunately, he ejected in the last 2 seconds and managed to save his life. But after the Apollo 11 moon lander successfully landed on the moon, conspiracy theorists argued that if the moon lander couldn't be controlled on Earth, how did it land on the moon? It's been 54 years since Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. But even today, many people believe it was all a hoax staged by NASA and America. Listening to these conspiracy theorists, they seem to make some logical arguments that can make an ordinary person wonder if America had indeed lied to us. Were the moon landings shot in some deserted desert? Now, whether it's a coincidence or a conspiracy, these theories find some reason to re-emerge every now and then. For example, in 2002, a person named Bart Sibrel, who believed the moon landings were fake, confronted Apollo 11 astronaut Edwin Buzz Aldrin with some inappropriate questions in front of the media, which angered Aldrin and he punched Sibrel in the face. This was the point when theories against the moon landings began to circulate again. People thought that Buzz Aldrin, the second man to step on the moon, must have been upset by the truth behind the conspiracy theorists' claims. But what is the reality? Were NASA's moon landings real? Or were they indeed a secret plan to undermine the Soviet Union in the eyes of the world? At the start of the space race, it was the Soviet Union that first sent a satellite into space and the first unmanned spacecraft to touch the moon, 10 years before NASA's Apollo 11 mission. So how did the Soviet Union fail to send humans to the moon even once, while NASA had done it 6 times? Let's crack these theories one by one and try to find the truth. The first thing that raises doubt in people's minds is the camera used to take photographs on the moon. Marcus Allen, a photographer who knows a lot about this camera, says that when he looks at the photographs taken on the moon, he can't believe how astronauts could have operated such a complicated camera from inside a spacesuit. A spacesuit is not a normal suit, but is fully pressurized, meaning it is filled with air, making precise movement of the hands and fingers impossible. Conspiracy theorist Ralph Renee conducted an experiment where he put on astronaut gloves and placed his hand inside a container. Initially, he could move his hand and fingers freely, but as soon as he used a compressor to remove all the air from the container, the gloves stiffened. Moving the hand in this vacuum chamber became very difficult. He argued that in such conditions, it's impossible to press a camera trigger or set its focus. If that's true, how were the memorable pictures taken on the moon so sharp and perfect? Aerospace engineer Jay Windley says that the camera used by the astronauts on the moon was a modified Hasselblad 500 EL, specifically for the lunar mission. This camera could slide and attach to the astronaut's suit, eliminating the need to hold it with hands. Additionally, the camera's shutter button was made large enough to be pressed easily with the gloves, and the focus ring was modified to be rotated even with stiff gloves. Since astronauts couldn't turn their heads much inside the spacesuit helmet, they had practiced extensively on Earth to capture the best photos on the moon. But even in these excellent photos, conspiracy theorists found a mistake: the lunar shadows. The former head of the American Rocket Company believes that the shadows in many moon photos are not parallel to each other, which they argue is evidence that we never went to the moon. They say that since the only light source on the moon was the sun, the shadows should have been parallel. Therefore, many believe these photos were taken in a studio with artificial light sources. For example, in this photo, you can see that the shadow of the lander's landing gear is going in one direction, while the astronaut's shadow is going in another. It may sound like these shadows are indeed due to artificial light sources, but experts say that on Earth too, shadows are often not parallel. Shadows will only be parallel if both objects are also parallel to each other. Additionally, if the photo is taken with a wide-angle lens, the shadows will not appear parallel, or if the surface is not smooth, the shadows will not be parallel either. Another theory often put forward by conspiracy theorists is about this photo where astronaut Aldrin is descending from the lunar lander, and the lander's side is not lit by the sun. Yet, Aldrin is well lit. Conspiracy theorist Marcus Allen argues that this would only be possible if there was another soft light source on him, but physicists say that when sunlight falls on the moon's surface, it reflects and bounces back, just like how our Earth lights up during a full moon night. So, the backlight seen on astronaut Aldrin in this photo is from the moon's surface reflecting sunlight. Regarding lighting, the way light passes through the American flag on the moon is also viewed with suspicion. Conspiracy theorists argue that if one side of the American flag is lit by the sun, how is the other side also perfectly lit? In reality, the American flag placed on the moon was made of nylon, a material that easily lets light pass through. But if there's no air on the moon, why was the American flag fluttering when it was being planted? Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin says they had not practiced planting the flag beforehand. The rod to which the flag was attached had to be twisted and pushed down with force because of the low gravity on the moon. Therefore, more force was needed, making the flag move more than necessary, giving the impression that it was fluttering in the wind. Additionally, the flag was designed with an aluminum rod not only on the side, but also on the top to prevent it from drooping on the moon. Conspiracy theorist and famous author Ralph Renee raised a question about the moon landing that cannot be explained in Earth's atmosphere. He argues that when a blower is used on soil or even small stones, the pressure of the air moves the soil and stones, creating a small crater. This blower certainly has less power than the thrusters of a moon lander, so why didn't it create even a small crater under Apollo 11's lander? It should have caused the soil to fly up and cover the landing gears, but there's not even a little soil on them. Physicists explain that just a few feet above the moon's surface, the lander's rocket motors were turned off. By the time it touched the moon's surface, 75% of the thrust was already reduced. Therefore, it did not create a crater, but if you look closely at the photos, you can see that the thrust did move some soil in different directions, just not enough to cover the landing gear. If there was still 25% thrust left, it would be equivalent to 1,250 kilograms of thrust. On Earth, this much thrust would definitely create a big crater. But why it didn't do so on the moon is still not explained in Earth's atmosphere. Another big question often asked by conspiracy theorists is why the sky in the photos taken on the moon appears completely black like it does on Earth at night, but why are there no stars visible? The camera lens works like the human eye. When we look in complete darkness, our pupils dilate to let in as much light as possible. Similarly, pupils contract when we look in bright light. You might have noticed that when stargazing, the surroundings are kept completely dark so that our pupils dilate, and even the faintest light from stars can reach our eyes. But if a light is turned on in this situation, the stars become invisible. Similarly, during the Apollo 11 mission, when photos were taken on the moon's surface was shining with sunlight, so the camera's lens did not capture the stars, as it was already receiving a lot of light, much more than the light from the stars. At that time, even though sunlight was falling on the moon, the sky appeared black because the moon has no atmosphere. Our Earth's atmosphere scatters sunlight, which is why the sky appears blue during the day. But in reality, beyond our atmosphere, the sky is actually black.